Hannah, the title of the session is The Greatest Hack the World Has Ever Seen. No sales pitches in this one, it's purely for information purposes. And it's taking you through a story of something called Sunburst and solar winds. Okay? The story starts in the White House. It starts in the White House in Washington, D.C. on the 12th of December, 2020. On the 12th of December, there was a National Security Council emergency meeting. This is not a normal event. This is a highly unusual event in American history. The National Security Council is the premier agency in the White House to engage with the president when the United States is under threat. Something very major was happening. Nobody knew outside the White House exactly what that was. This is where Sunburst and solar winds starts. National Security Council is the United States President's principal forum for considering national security and foreign matters. The United States of America were under zero-day cyber attack. I want to take you through what happened during that period. I want to take you through one of the biggest hacks we have ever seen on the globe. We want to take you through how over 250 American public state agencies were compromised and how over 18,000 potential victims around the world could have been hit. We want to see what we can learn about this. We want to understand this, and we want to go through and see how we can change how we run our businesses and how we advise our management teams on what the right thing to do is. So there is lessons, even though this is an act of war. It's an act of cyber war. There's lessons for all of us to learn out of solar winds. And the first lesson is, what is a zero day? Because you'll hear me refer to solar winds and sunburst as a zero-day attack. Well, I was just saying to my friend Johan, this is one of the first times that I've been out of the house in the last 2 years. Anybody else the same? Okay, I've just turned into a hermit for some reason. I can't really work out why. The reason, of course, is COVID was a zero day. Our immune systems had never seen it before, and our immune systems didn't know what to do about it. There was no patch, there was no antidote, there was no cure. And when it hits you, doesn't it? COVID and sunburst have the same founding principles. If we know that something exists, we can prepare for it. We can detect it, we can control it, we can manage it. If we don't know it exists, we have literally got no defenses. Everybody who works in information security and cyber, we're all petrified, we're terrified of the next zero-day attack because you get zero time to prepare. Your defenses have zero impact. Your business does need to be prepared. The reason why sunburst and solar winds was so effective is there was no warning. There was no patch, cure, vaccine, antidote. There was no IOC. IOC, indicator of a compromise. Your network experts, your cybersecurity professionals, the controls that you put on a network look for telltale signs that there's something wrong. That's your IOCs. We all know what we'll do if suddenly you can't taste and can't smell. It's a good IOC of COVID. Sunburst and solar winds, 18,000 businesses globally, 250 American public sector agencies. We're including the Department of Homeland Security, the agency that is in charge of the United States interior security, the one that defends its borders. It couldn't defend its own logical perimeter. Intel, Cisco, and even Deloitte. I did check the list before I came in case somebody else was presenting. But these are household names. These are absolutely some of the biggest names in the world. How did they get hit? How did somebody bypass the security, effort, and controls and mitigate all their defensive techniques? So, questions for today. What I want to go through in the next 40 minutes is try to answer some questions. What could have been done to prevent it? How did it happen? Who conducted the attack? How did they breach so many targets, 18,000 simultaneously? What vulnerability did they exploit? Who was behind the attack, and what security controls were actually breached. I want to walk through a timeline and a story to help explain some of these things to see can we all learn just a little bit from what's actually happened. To do this, well, I need to do a little bit of background. Our goal is to try to defeat hackers. And to do that, we need to understand their modus operandi. We need to understand what we call the hack chain. The hack chain is the process that a standard hacker will go through. Well, it was animated, okay? The hack chain, it's a process like any business process. And hackers now approach this like a job. They have research and development, they have HR, they have finance. They set up projects, they have meetings. And in exactly the same way as McDonald's has a project, so too do the Russian mafia. The crimeware project. It all starts with a weakness and a vulnerability. If you have no vulnerabilities, you are invulnerable. If you're invulnerable, you don't need firewalls, controls, and protection because you don't have to worry about what's out there. It all starts with a vulnerability. Hackers need to weaponize that in order to exploit it. Exploits are the things we're all worried about. The things that you read on the news, like Spectre and Meltdown, things like Shell Shock and Bashbug, things like remote code injection and SQL injection. The exploits are there to deliver something for the hacker, to accomplish a hacker's goal. Exploits by themselves are not actually that dangerous. The exploit is used to deliver a payload. If you take an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, it's not as dangerous as you think it is, because it's not the ICBM that kills you, it's the little pointy bit on top, isn't it? The payload or the warhead. It's exactly the same in a hack. They have to discover a vulnerability, they have to weaponize that vulnerability in order to exploit it. And the exploit delivers a payload. It's the payload that does the damage. It's the payload that's the ransomware. It's the payload that steals your Visa card information. It's the payload that turns your webcam on and watches you and turns your microphone on and listens to you. The payload is actually what the hacker's looking to accomplish. We don't call this vulnerability exploit and payload. Most people refer to it as the hack. And the hacker, to go through a hack, has to go through 3 different phases: reconnaissance, weaponization, and pawning. Reconnaissance is one of the hardest acts to do. It's research, it's looking at a target, it's exploring way in. The terminology, of course, comes from the military. And we'll find out later, it was a military organization that carried out this attack. So we're going to look at how recon happened, we're going to look how weaponization happened, and we're going to see how the pawn actually happened itself. Yes, it does say part 2. I thought I'd do it like one of those American shows. We do it back to front and inside out. Confuse everybody. Look, there's 2 parts to every attack. The bit you see and the bit you don't see. So part 2 is the bit that we see. When we actually learned that the attack was going on, that we learned that the actor had accessed the systems. This is the timeline. We're calling this T0. This is the first time we discovered it. One of the world's leading security companies is a company called FireEye. These people have some of the world's leading information security and cyber experts. Can you imagine what security they have on their own network, their own system, their own servers? These people, I wouldn't like to see what their daily consultancy rate is. It's a little bit more than mine, I do expect. But these people are the people who advise government agencies that advise the biggest companies in the world. They were compromised. FireEye was compromised. One of the most secure networks in the world. Why should I care? Well, do you know what their specialism is? Red team. Red team's another name for pen testing. Pen testing's another name for ethical hacking. Their goal is to do the same as the hackers. But instead of charging you afterwards to get rid of the ransomware, they charge you beforehand, usually about the same amount. They stole the red team toolkit. They hacked into FireEye and they accessed their zero-day vulnerabilities, the weapons that they had developed to go around military networks, nuclear, civilian, industry, and to test them. And the first indication was an IOC on an XDR. XDR, extended detection response. We need a burglar alarm. Hell, we need more than one burglar alarm. We need multiple burglar alarms on a network to tell you if somebody's in or not. XDR is putting many, many alarms, combining the results and trying to look at the statistics and anomalies to detect things on your network. They received an IOC. The minute they received it, they went to their playbook, their incident response plan, and they invoked a full emergency response inside FireEye. 3 days later, they were doing intrusion analysis. They were looking to see what happened, how it happened, who it did it. They released publicly an IOC. We need this. It's the first indicator that something's gone wrong. When COVID came out, we needed a test. To do a test, you need an IOC. FireEye released the IOC. They said, look, we've been hacked. And it wasn't really us. It was this piece of software that we use, a piece of software called SolarWinds. SolarWinds, over 200,000 networks around the world use a SolarWinds piece of software. They use it to automate, to manage, to make your life easier. And they said it was this software. It was SolarWinds. Check your networks. 3 days in, people around the world, SOCs, Security Operations Centers, your Cyber Technical Center was looking for these IOCs. 4 days later, we had the National Security Council emergency meeting. It's unprecedented to have it for a cyber attack. This is usually an act of war. This is usually something that threatens the United States survival. 4 days afterwards, the NSA, the National Security Agency, the Cyber Warfare Division of the American Army, called this emergency meeting. Something momentous was happening. We learned 5 days later, on the 13th of December, that they issued Emergency Directive 4101. It was never invoked before. It required an immediate response from every American sector agency, military, law enforcement, and agency. It required them to stop using SolarWinds and to look at their networks immediately to find out if they were impacted. It has never been invoked before. It's the most stringent action we've actually seen from a government agency, a Western government agency, ever. Power down SolarWinds Orion because of a substantial security threat. That came out of the White House on the 13th of December. 6 days later, SolarWinds, the company, had to file a SEC Form 8K. If you're an American business and you're floated on the stock market, if you have a major event, something that can affect your share price and your stockholders, you must announce it to them. This was the first public admission. Something went wrong in one of your vendors. Just think of this. How many software suppliers do you have? How many different vendors provide you software? How many people out here on the floor sell products and solutions that you might use in your network? It wasn't the government's network that was hacked. It was SolarWinds. SolarWinds used by 200,000 companies on a global basis. 7 days in, the news broke to the public. A product called Orion had been compromised. And do you know what the hackers compromised? A security update. The very updates that you download to prevent this happening. The hackers compromised SolarWinds somehow, gained access to the software development team, and Trojaned. They put code inside the software. You didn't go to a third party. You didn't download it off some random website. This was the real SolarWinds website. And the software that you're downloading to improve your security was actually doing the exact opposite. Sunburst had been confirmed. 7 days in, the initial list of victims starts to emerge. We've got the US Commerce and Treasury departments that manage the entire United States economy. We've got the Department of Homeland Security. We've got the National Institutes of Health and the State Department. And this is only 7 days since we first discovered it existed. The list of victims continues to grow in T plus 9 days. We've got the Energy Department and the National Nuclear Administration of America being hit by solar burst and sunburst and solar winds. By 11 days in, the true nature of what's happened is really being divulged. Look at the list of companies. Deloitte, NVIDIA, Fujitsu, Belkin. This is only a short list. We had 200 government agencies and companies all around the world after 11 days. 12 days in, 18,000 of its 300,000 customers. Could have been worse. But 18,000 people had downloaded this bad security patch, which actually is quite puzzling. Why did only 18,000 people download an important security patch? Okay, it should have been worse, but for some reason people weren't patching. I don't know to say now if security patching is good or bad, because we're now conflicted. We need a safe way to do it, don't we? This is 3 months after the event. US CERT is the United States of American Emergency Cyber Response Team. Their job is to protect the United States of America against these attacks. 3 months in. And this is the headline on their website. An APT, an Advanced Persistent Threat. That's what we're talking about today. A very misused word. Every time I watch the news or see one of these conferences, you know, every business, if they get hacks, had an APT. It was terrible. We had an APT. Oh, really? What happened? Somebody clicked an email. No. Doesn't matter how stupid the email was, that is never going to be an APT. An APT is when a skilled group of hackers is targeting you specifically. They have a budget, they have a multidisciplinary team, they have an objective to achieve. It is not an email link. They're not going to give up. APTs are really quite a serious thing. Sunburst. A hacker group known as APT-29 compromised the security update by SolarWinds for a product called Orion, used by 200,000 organizations globally. The attack was downloaded 18,000 times from SolarWinds servers. 250 United States agencies were hit in this one single attack. APT-29, it's the Russian SVR. It's Russian military intelligence. The Russians had carried out a cyber warfare attack on continental USA and were successful. I mean, that's what an APT is. We reckon there were up to 20 individual members on that particular group. How long did they work for? Where did they set up? How did they go about it? We'll look at that in just a little second. So, how did it happen? Part 2 was this was the impact. Part 1 is, how exactly did this occur? How did we get to a stage where we have businesses around the world falling to the cyber attack? What can we learn from it? What can we gain from it? What? 23 months before the attack, before we learned this was real, there was a threat actor group known as APT-29 that had funding, that had a multidisciplinary team, that had a target and an objective to achieve. This is an APT. 24 months, nearly 2 years. 15 months before it, the Access Solar Winds. So, 15 to 23, they spent 8 months on their first objective. How do we get into a network that can't be hacked? The answer is you don't. You circumvent. You look for a back door, a side door. You look for some way in that they didn't think. They didn't go after the target. They went after a vendor, because they knew that their target used the vendor's product, and they knew that the vendor had less security than the target did. APT 29 starts trying to attempt to inject code into SolarWinds products. This started on the 12th of September 2019. We are still 15 months away from knowing that this attack actually has happened. T-minus 14 months. They perform trial runs. You all have software developed, whether for your own team or your business, don't you? You might even develop software for your customers. This is 3 months development and 10 months software testing. When's the last time you spent 10 months testing your software? That's a big undertaking for any threat actor group. They wanted to get this right, and they knew they had a single opportunity to do so. 12 months in, it runs a beta. It did alpha and beta releases to prove the concept worked. After all the testing, they did more testing. T-minus 10 months. Sunburst was compiled and ready to go 10 months before we knew it. In actual fact, it was released on the 26th of March 2020. It was out there in the wild, doing its job, achieving its objectives for APT 29 for 9 months. It could have been on the Department of Homeland Security. It could have been on Cisco's network, Deloitte's network, for up to 9 months. It wasn't until FireEye came along and discovered it in December 2020. We don't know exactly what happened, but we do know that that attack was ready to download from the website 9 months before we got it. We may never know exactly what happened in that 9-month period, but we know that's not good. Could you imagine how bad a situation we'd been in if it had been 9 months before we caught COVID the first time? If we had misdiagnosed it for 9 months? What sort of mess would we be in? Even worse than the mess we're in now. Sunburst SolarWinds. Sunburst was a supply chain attack. It didn't go after your firewalls, it didn't go after your servers, it didn't go after your cloud system. It went after your vendors and your providers. What box with blue LED flashing lights can you buy to protect against that? SolarWinds bypass security measures. It's the Russian military you're up against. Okay, one of the American generals of the NSA said asking a business to defend themselves against this type of attack is equivalent of handling umbrellas out in the case of nuclear war. A nice idea, but pretty ineffective. What are you going to do against attacks like that? That's the question that I'm really posing. Lessons. Okay. Why did I want to stand up here today and talk about Sunburst SolarWinds? Well, one, because it's interesting. Well, I find it interesting anyway. And it's a story. I can't wait till the Hollywood movie comes out. Okay, because you know it's coming. Something this big, something this interesting, something with international political intrigue. You know the Hollywood blockbuster's coming at some stage. It's a lesson. There has to be something that we can take away. There has to be something that we can learn. In my personal experience, I've been in this business for 25 years. I've worked with companies at all sizes and all continents of the world. And in my experience, people are actually quite nice. And they're also quite optimistic. You do want nice people in your cyber and IS teams, but I'm not quite sure if you want optimistic people. Because optimistic people go, it isn't gonna happen to me. Guess what? If somebody tells you that this cannot happen on your network, they are lying. There's no questions about this. If somebody tells you, if you're the network IT person and you're telling your management, we've protected ourselves, this can't happen, you are lying to them. If you're the person that they're telling it can't happen, they're lying to you. If your vendors are telling you it can't happen, they're lying to you. We have to change the way we think about this. We have to assume that it will happen. You have to assume that, yes, it's unlikely, but there is a statistical probability that it will happen to me. They compromised SolarWinds. Fine, it's just a vendor. They compromised FireEye, one of the global leaders in this field. They compromised the Department of Homeland Security. How do you think your network security, your cloud security, your training compares to the Department of Homeland Security, the single biggest budget holder in the United States of America? If those networks can be compromised, so too can yours. Come from a position to say, it can happen and it will happen. Have plans not just to protect yourself, to prevent it, to deter it. Have plans about exactly what you will do if it does happen. We've even got names for these plans. They're called our playbooks, straight out of American football, if there's any American football fans. A playbook is an incident response plan. It says, if this happens to us, we've sat down, we've thought about it, and these are the actions that we're going to take. This is how we're going to defend our stakeholders, our shareholders. It's how we're going to defend our employees and our customers, and how we're going to protect our business. Notice I'm not mentioning antivirus and firewalls, because a lot of organizations are quite competent in that area these days. You see, what's happening? It's not all about technology anymore. How many times, if you're a business owner, if you work in technology, if you're an IT person or cyber person, how many boxes with blue LED flashing lights have you been tried to be sold in the past 2 years? How many magic bullets? How many things have come out that vendors have offered you to say, look, this is the one. This is the one that's going to fix the problem. Technical solutions alone are not enough. You leave this to your IT department, you will be the next victim. It requires a lot more than technical controls. It requires something much more difficult to do. Strong leadership and corporate governance. This is not an issue that a business management team can brush off. It's not an issue we can turn around and say, it's a technical problem. Technical people will fix it. This is not going away. You run a business today, in 2021. This is a real substantial threat to your organization. We need to understand it's a management problem. We need to provide the management team with the skills and capability necessary to understand the threat. Until you do that, you're not going to solve it. The management team need to be able to measure the risk that's unique to your company. How do you work? What's your growth plan? How many of employees? What technology do you use? Everybody's risk will be different. We need a clear strategy. The strategy that I see working with boards around the world is, it's an IT problem, and we'll tell IT to fix it, and that's us all sorted. It doesn't matter. The people at the top of a business are accountable. And those accountable people, when the proverbial hits the fan, they will still be accountable. It has to be a top-down approach. What knowledge, background, and capability does your leadership team have? If you work in IT or a technical role, what have you specifically done to help your management team understand and engage in this topic? Scare tactics don't work. Understanding does. That's the point. Lesson 3. No matter what we do, there's one fundamental lesson I do want you to leave with. Fail to plan, plan to fail. No matter how good a job you do, you will always leave little teeny gaps, little small vulnerabilities. And it's those little small vulnerabilities that will be leveraged by a hacker during reconnaissance to look for an exploit to deliver a payload. Risk mitigation is exactly what it says it is. It doesn't remove risk, it doesn't eliminate risk, it merely mitigates it. Technical controls delay the inevitable. That's not a nice word, is it? It's not a very comfortable word. Technical controls do nothing more than delay the inevitable. So you need plans. And these are not technology plans. They're business plans. What will your business do? How will your business survive? How will you continue to grow? We need business continuity plans, we need incident response plans, and we need disaster recovery plans. I always tell people there's one true thing about a plan. You don't have one unless it's been tested. The benefit of having these plans is practicing and testing them, making sure they work. What I wanted to leave you with is three essentials that I have learned in the last 25 years that the smallest to the largest organization need to follow. And it's not rocket science. It really genuinely isn't. Number one, you absolutely must have a leadership team that understands this issue, that appreciates the risk, that can drive a clear and coherent strategy. You see, there's a fundamental problem that IT has. Security is a balancing act. You have two things in security: information security controls and your business, the usability, the functionality, the service you provide, and they're attached together. Every single time you increase security, what are you doing to usability and functionality? What are you doing to the profitability of your organization? And if you make functionality and usability the most important, you do exactly the opposite. IT, information security and cyber, we can set that seesaw anywhere the business wants it. It's just somebody wouldn't tell us where the business wants this, because that seesaw is the competitiveness of your company. If you're in a rival and you have two rival companies in the same market, two competitors, one of them puts in too little risk, wild-eyed coyote, takes every possible risk, but the other company is Roadrunner. They take no risks whatsoever. I don't really care about competing with them, because neither of them will succeed. You have to be willing to take a little bit of risk to succeed in a business. Not too much, not too little. It's the one in that sweet zone, that Goldilocks zone between too many controls and too few. They're the most profitable organizations. You try to protect your system. You make sure that you have an IS and cyber capability. It can be inside, it can be outside, but you need that trusted partnership. You need to make sure whatever way that you deal with cyber, that the capability that you have in your organization is appropriate. You can't have GCHQ level of security, but you don't want wild-eyed coyote level of security either. You don't want to be wide open and you don't want to be too tight. And the final, and perhaps the most important one, I was sitting at home in February 2019, February 2020, 2019, I can't remember now, it's so long ago. And suddenly, every single customer that I hadn't spoken to for maybe 9 months, a year, 2 years, maybe 5 years since I spoke to them, they were all on the phone to me, begging me for business continuity projects. Just out of the blue, all of a sudden. COVID. Business continuity is at the top of everybody's agenda. Let's make sure cyber business continuity is right in there, intertwined with all the other things that we have to worry about. We need business continuity and disaster recovery plans. Look, these sessions, they're always to me about sharing something and learning a little bit. My name is Sean Hanna. I'm the founder and director of Northern Ireland's only cybersecurity and information security training business, Nemstar. We've actually been trading out of Belfast for over 10 years now, but our customer base is usually international rather than local. COVID's, I've never spent so long at home. I've been quite happy. I'm not sure if the wife and kids have been, but I've been quite happy being stuck at home for the past time, because my life previously was traveling to help organizations on a global basis deal with these risks and look at the capabilities that they have. I'm open for questions. You can ask them formally or informally. We have 9 minutes left, okay? So any questions, any comments, any feedback? Does anybody want to ask anything? Well, look, if you want to ask on an offline basis, I'll be ready just over here in a few minutes. But for me, I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. Have a great day, folks.